Hello, everybody. I believe we are now live. So let's get started. It's Ice and FireCon Virtual 2021. Well, the Ice and FireCon part is virtual. 2021 is real.
It is all too real.
Yeah, it's too real. So it was pretty cool. We're a lot of us, we know each other pretty well, this group of people. So I wrote a little short intro, but we could start off by introducing each other. So since I'm already talking, say hi everybody to me and Wendy and Lady Gwyn.
Hi everybody. Hi.
We really don't need
Wendy.
full introductions, do we? Everybody knows who we are, right?
Well, I know most of the people in the chat, so yeah. Everybody probably
I know a lot of
knows
the people in the chat. I don't know everyone in the chat though.
Okay. Yeah. I think most people know who Wendy is, but Wendy's here and she's going to have some good opinions on this topic, I think. So I hope we all do. And this is neat. We're faced with a new situation, right? Fandoms are not a new phenomenon, of course, but I think comparing now, like 2021, real 2021 to 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, things are changing. We've got a change in the way television works. You know, all these studios are breaking off and doing their own networks. You've got Marvel and Star Wars, which are just unbelievably huge with how many shows they're putting out. And those are both owned by Disney. So that's pretty huge. But in addition to this expansion, there's lots of other shows that are coming out on these other networks. Like, seems like almost every network has one or two or three fantasy shows, not just talking about sci-fi, which is, there's a lot of that too. But even if we stick just to fantasy, by the end of next year, let's say 18 to 20 months from now, Witcher season 2, Lord of the Rings season 1, Wheel of Time season 1, Shadow and Bone came out like last night, right? And House of the Dragon, which is the big one of the big ones we'll talk about today. But on the heels of House of the Dragon, apparently there's going to be other productions. We don't know which ones yet, nor how many. But the fact that they're entertaining so many at once is a pretty good sign. So at some point in the horizon, we'll have even more shows. We don't know which ones, maybe several new ones. That's a lot of content, but compared to Marvel and Star Wars, it's really nothing compared to that.
I don't know. The Lord of the Rings adaptation is apparently going to be something like $80 million per episode.
Yeah, it's insane. Their budget for 2 seasons is almost $500 million. So I mean,
they got that Bezos money.
So I mean, that just goes to show, right? That just proves the point. Like, these studios, they have a lot of data on what people want to watch, and this is where they're putting a lot of money. So HBO's getting on the act. So that's my starting spiel. Let's get some takes from somebody else here. House of the Dragon. We'll start with that. Right now, we hopefully, if we're lucky, maybe it's being too optimistic, but maybe the timing will work out that we'll see an episode of House of the Dragon during Ice and FireCon 2022. If it comes in that April timeframe like Game of Thrones has traditionally, if you can call it a tradition yet, then that'll line up. So that's something to be excited about.
Yeah, well,
definitely.
It will depend on how they feel comfortable releasing that. I think. I mean, we don't really have all the casting news yet, do we? We don't have all the. Do we have Aegon the II cast?
No,
yet?
there's a lot of castings yet to go. So it's true. You're right. It might be too tight of a time frame for that, but we're still a year away, and I don't know. It's hard to say how far ahead they are. But you're right. The fact they haven't casted a lot of people is maybe they're not ready.
It also depends on the. By the way, Emily, thank you for saying you like The Crown. I wish we had. If we were at the actual convention, I would be in full Sansa cosplay. But
if we were at a convention, I'd be in my full Rhaenys cosplay. But
yeah,
can't have everything.
Rhaenys and Sansa would get along very well. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's something like. I think it's going to be complicated because of just how they're dealing with the shooting schedule. I don't know too much about how they're shooting it right now. It also depends on the scale they go with.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't know exactly what the budget is. I don't think is it as high as Game of Thrones was though.
I don't think so, but it's higher than Game of Thrones season 1 was. It's substantially more than that. But
everything was higher than Game of Thrones.
It's somewhere in the middle. So I think it's pretty big, but I don't think we have actual numbers. It's hard to speculate.
Matt Smith is expensive on his own, right?
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it really depends on what they're willing to pay for it and what the shooting schedule is like. I know they're shooting a lot of it in England, and I know the UK is having way more coronavirus problems right now. Like, it's been getting worse.
That's a good point. Yeah, the Corona schedule, like we mentioned some of these other shows that are coming out. Like I mentioned, Witcher season 2, that would have probably already been out by now if it weren't for Corona. So good point. It's fair to mention that.
But I worry about. I like the location scouting. I think we talked about that before a little bit.
Yeah, we actually got some new news on that last night, didn't we? Some sightings of what appears to be Driftmark. The sigil was sighted there, so that's kind of a dead giveaway. So that's pretty awesome.
Very exciting.
What do you think about that, Gwyn?
I am wicked excited about these locations. So the locations that have been sort of scoped out are all in Cornwall, which is, full disclosure, one of my favorite places in the world. It's very close to where Yoke Boy comes from. We've spent a lot of time there. So these specific places are not familiar to me. They are to him. And one of them was on my bucket list. That's the one that is probably Driftmark. That's St. Michael's Mount, which is an island off the south coast of Cornwall. It's got a medieval castle, a church, and a little village. It's only, get this, and I have to hat tip to Watchers on the Wall for this observation. It's only accessible at high tide.
Which makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Let's be honest.
This is probably what they're going for there, but very, very excited about all these places. The other filming location over on the other side of Cornwall, where they saw the Warner Brothers trucks over by Newquay, is at a place called Penhill Sands and Penhill Camp. And Penhill Camp is a place, it was a World War II training grounds. So this is just a big place with it's still got like machine gun, bunkers and all kinds of stuff like that. So God only knows what they're going to be filming in that area. There's lots of castles. There's another castle that they may have seen some filming crews at, which is one of the more finely preserved castles in Cornwall. And there's lots of lighthouses. So, last night we were making notes about, could we see the High Tower? And there are some really cool lighthouses in Cornwall, which I could see them doing something with. They're not really, however tall a High Tower is. 70
I think Cornwall generates something like, in revenue to the crown, they make something like was it £20 million per year just in it's a very, I think it's considered pretty much the resort area of England, isn't it, more or less?
Well, Devon and Cornwall, actually where Yoke Boy's from, was once known as the English Riviera. Before the age of cheap airfares. But still, Cornwall is like I don't know if you're from New England, it's like the Cape Cod of England. So it's
apologies if you guys hear any weird noises at some point. My cat has decided to play around with the blinds. So
let me give a quick shout out real quick. After you've browse the Ice and Firecon store, head over to sanrixian.com, or you can get a shirt like this one that I'm wearing.
You might want to stand up a little bit because your name is I should have worn my.
It's a House Driftmark shirt.
I actually have a Sanrixian shirt, and I didn't even think to wear it. I was I'm so stupid. I have an awesome wolf shirt. So
I think she has a sale going right now too.
Yeah, she does.
Anyway, so that's cool. What else do we want to talk about with the location stuff, or do we want to move on to casting?
I'm really interested in some of the maybe the set design and the costuming, if we could talk about.
Oh yeah. Actually, that's a good segue. You brought this up when I was trying to get some ideas from out there. So I posted on Twitter, what are some visuals people are looking forward to? And I believe you responded with this topic here, which I think is a really good one, because the Targaryens are so much wealthier than what we saw from Robert Baratheon's regime and all that.
Well, it's a very interesting point. Well, I think also that just has to do with the fact that budgeting issues. But true. What I'm hoping to see, what I want to see, is a departure from the styles that we actually saw in Game of Thrones, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I know this is a controversial opinion, but I was actually pretty underwhelmed with a lot of the costuming in Game of Thrones. Like sometimes it was really good. I liked a lot of Daenerys's outfits, but for the most part, like I was kind of disappointed by the lack of opulence, especially from like the Lannisters. I felt like a lot of things, especially towards the end, everybody looked really boring. Even Daenerys looked boring, and I didn't think you could make Emilia Clarke look kind of boring, but they kind of did. They just piled more hair on top of her, and I'm really hoping that it's like they definitely make an effort to make sure the styles are very different, and that I'm kind of hoping like Borgia level opulence on this one, because a lot of the things that are like made clear in Fire and Blood is how like all that whole entire generation of Targaryens that made for the dance lived incredibly indulgent lives. Like, you know, like Viserys lived a very indulgent life. Rhaenyra lived a very indulgent life. You know, Aegon, like both. One of the things that does kind of annoy me about the casting is they cast somebody very thin to play Rhaenyra. And as a chubster myself, I would have really liked to have seen, you know, a chubby queen like kicking ass and taking names. You know, I wonder if they're
gonna change that. Like, I wonder if they're gonna have her gain weight or something, because that's supposedly that's supposed to be what happens in the timeline.
But
I don't know.
She's supposed to be a little bit chubby even before she has all her kids.
She's quite young at the beginning, and that's actually one of the questions that I have. Although not to get off the. Not to get off the costuming, I just looked up who the costume designer, or one of the costume designers, is somebody called Janie Tamime. I'm sorry, I just probably mangled that, but she's worked on Harry Potter, a lot of Harry Potter films, In Bruges and Skyfall.
Different person, in other words. It's
Black
not,
Widow.
Yeah.
It's not the same person, and it's someone who's worked on a lot of different things. Like
that's good.
And she's so. So
it'll
be interesting.
I hope it's like, so like a lot. Aegon's supposed to be really chubby, like, you know, like I'm kind of hoping that we see this sort of like this indulgence, because I feel like it would set like a really good tone too, like just how like ensconced in these sort of like entitlement and like desire for power everybody is, but also like how much they fall, because both of them die horribly. Like everyone comes to like the worst end, and if we started from this area where everybody's walking around grand and fabulous and all this stuff, right? And I also am kind of hoping that we see a bit of like the relationship that Alicent and Rhaenyra have before the power jockeying starts, because it's in Fire and Blood, they kind of make it clear like at first they liked each other. And, at first, they kind of liked each other. They really liked each other, and it would be amazing to like see that kind of. And it would be. I'm kind of hoping we just see all that opulence and all this like glory, and then it would be such a great like contrast, the absolute devastation that's going to be wrought.
Like seeing. I think there's a lot of to be said for as far as from an audience perspective of seeing like really powerful but terrible people, really rich, lazy people like fall from power. Like there's something to be said for that being a little satisfying. You know, it's like Schadenfreude kind of thing.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, you know, how far back the story goes. You know, where do they start? You know, as far as giving us the backstory. I mean, is a lot of it going to be left to be revealed in sort of, you know, brought in later, or at what point are they actually going to start the story? Obviously, they've cast Viserys, and there are a number of unannounced characters that could actually give a big hint to how far back they go, right? Because you know, if they have, you know, there's people that we don't know are even going to be involved. But I guess there's a lot of questions in the chat about casting, so maybe we should
talk about that. Let me make one overarching statement about what I think they're going to do with casting here in terms of one particular situation. I think there's a really good chance they just age up Rhaenyra to avoid the relationship thing, because otherwise they just have to have Rhaenyra go for Daemon. They just can't have. I don't think they would depict Daemon hitting on 11-year-old Rhaenyra in the show. So
I kind of almost hope that they do, though, because I feel like look, I'm still surviving the whitewashing of Tyrion. Okay, I'm sorry. Like I am. They say that. Oh, by the way, apparently the casting call for Rhaenys was like somebody in their 20s. But didn't they cast who did they cast again? It was Claire.
So Rhaenys is going to be, she's my girl. She's going to be played by Eve Best from Nurse Jackie, among other things. I think she's also been in. I'm trying to think.
Oh, okay. So apparently, no, they didn't. So they didn't go with some. Okay, sorry.
No, she's probably in her 40s or 50s.
Yeah, she's in her
about right then. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're not starting too early.
People were asking about Rhys Ifans. That's Otto Hightower. It might have been answered in the chat, but I saw that was repeatedly being asked down there. Of course, Patty Considine as Viserys is the big, obviously they're not going to just bring Patty Considine in for an episode. At least I don't think they are.
Yeah, it's probably more like, I think you're right. It's probably like Robert, where it's 4 or 5.
Yeah, so I mean that's a hint to us as to how far, maybe where they're going to start things, because they obviously can't just start with Viserys dying and dive right into things. There's going to be a
I'm really hoping we see the black and green feast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do too. That big fingers crossed for that one, because that's, like you said, it brings up a lot of the opportunities they can show, like the opulence, and it also allows us to see where their relationship goes wrong, and where some of these alliances, or not alliances, that's not the right word. The cliques start to form. Just the two cliques really start to form. So so it really accomplishes a lot of these things we want, like right there. So, and I'm pretty sure the showrunners noticed that, probably caught that as an idea, like this is a moment right here we could really show. It'd be visually awesome and do a lot of stage setting. Reason for optimism there, I'd say.
Yeah,
I mean, I like the actors that they cast for all of this. I know that there was some very silly controversies about that a little bit, but the only thing I don't like is that they cast somebody skinny to play Rhaenyra. I don't want a skinny woman playing Rhaenyra. Or skinny person playing Rhaenyra in this case. But yeah, no, so I'm kind of like just hoping about like the look. I hope it really does look different from Game of Thrones. Like I think it will really help capture the era and give like a new sort of feeling of it, like sort of really breathe as its own independent series. Even though it's a spinoff, it would be sort of like revitalized, I guess, because I feel like given some of the fan reaction to how like Game of Thrones turned it out and everything, I think it wouldn't be a terrible idea to just give it a whole sort of a different tone at first.
Yeah, having they obviously can't do everything differently, because there's going to be some things that are familiar, and they want to lean on the things that work, but they can't just do everything the same, right? So I agree with you. And changing the visuals is a really good way to be creative and kick off that change really well with something, starting off with things looking differently, and then hopefully they also sound and feel a bit differently too, but they still also have that familiarity that kind of helped capture that success in the first place. Because like you said, the casting seems pretty good so far. I agree, and that was something that was, other than the general comment you made about Rhaenyra, which was true in the first show as well, that they tend to Hollywoodize things. Like Jorah, perfect example, like way more handsome than he's supposed to be. For example. Yeah, there's endless examples of that.
Tyrion is a certified hottie, and Tyrion in the book is very much not, even before he loses his nose.
I totally agree.
I think John describes him as the ugliest person he's ever seen, or something like that.
So we're all used to that. So it's like we'll probably have to expect some more of that, because it's just like 99% of shows do that. But they might get creative with it too, like you say. Like there's so many Targaryen. If there was only like 5 Targaryens, it would be hard. Like they would be like all good looking, but with 20, maybe they'll have more variety. So
and I'm also hoping we see more of like the more minor houses, because when I think back on Game of Thrones, like aside from the Freys and the Tarleys, I don't think we see like any, I guess
they're off and on other ones, but
I guess
like
House
consistency.
Stokeworth, we don't really see any like whole like that's why I was so excited to see Driftmark, because we don't really see a lot of the holdings of minor houses. We don't really spend a lot of time with minor houses. It's almost entirely like main houses plus like people who are on who serve them, I guess, directly. Like, I mean, Brienne is there and she's at House Tarth. I guess the Boltons, but like, they become a major house for a little while.
Yeah, it's kind of like off and on. There's kind of like some small rising and falling. I think with this one, they might, it'll be somewhat similar, that there's some recognizable houses that'll be through it the whole way. And then there'll be some other minor houses that become important for a little while and maybe they fade away again. Yeah, that would be kind of like the first show, but that might be, I guess that would be fine in my opinion. But I would prefer to draw some of them out more, I guess.
I do not think we are going to get a book accurate throne though. They're going to get the same throne. That's probably
true.
Also the book, like, I hate to say it, but as much as I love like the book illustrations, like in the World of Ice and Fire, like the show version is so iconic at this point. There's no way they're going to do it.
Yeah. I wonder, how much, so we're talking about like using different visuals and whatnot, but how much do you think HBO is going to say, look, we got millions of dollars into these sets. Mm-hmm. You have to use the throne room. And that throne room doesn't change, like,
it shouldn't be that different.
For realism, are they going to reuse the same sets, or at least the same kind of set design, just to keep it feeling sort of like, say,
yeah, like it would be weird if it was a different Dragonstone throne. If we saw the seat of Dragonstone, it was different. That'd be like, why is it different? Like would be.
We need to have some recognizable stuff. Like, how much are they shooting in Belfast? Are they shooting in Belfast again?
As far as I know, they're not. But may change.
It's all going to be
that's where the entire Red Keep was, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, the entirety of the Red Keep, except for like some of the.
So they could recycle, exterior shots and everything. We don't really know, and obviously, Miguel Sapochnik has worked on all that, so he's probably well aware of what they could reuse.
They could move the throne and the skulls. They still have all those skulls. In Belfast.
Matthew and Dominique, they are. Ramin Djawadi is in fact returning. That is.
That was fantastic.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that was one of the best single pieces of news we could have gotten, right?
Yeah, that would be so.
Like, if you could pick one person to bring from the old show, like only one person involved at all, I'd be like,
it would be him.
Probably be him. As
for like the music and the theme in it, like somebody asked if the theme song is going to be, we think the theme song is going to be the same. I wouldn't be surprised if they retool it. Maybe like they might take some bits of it, like. Maybe the da 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 da, like might be like sort of an undercurrent or something. I don't know musical terms, but like it'll be kind of like sampled a little bit. But I think we are going to get a new theme.
On that topic, one of the comments that came through that Twitter thread where I was asking people for their things they're most looking forward to see, John Hagee said he's looking forward to what they do with the intro, maybe seeing like the sea snake going on a ship, or he suggests Rhaenys riding Meleys, or showing High Tide or Driftmark, these other locations that they could show on the map popping up. So that'd be one way to like keep the feel, along with the music being by the same composer but not identical. Like, because we all know it's like when you watch, like, using Star Wars as an example again, like it was clearly John Williams in the new trilogy, and it was clearly not John Williams in like Rogue One. And,
you can tell the difference.
I think I've referenced this show before, but like I'm kind of hoping the opening is a little bit like the opening of the Borgias. If anybody's seen that show,
I don't remember what it's like, but I did watch that show. I don't remember the intro though.
Like it's a bunch of like classic art and stuff like that, but a bunch of like close-ups of like kind of like nefarious things with drops of blood and shit. Okay. I would love to see like that sort of thing painted, like paintings, but like sort of like they look like frescoes, but it's Targaryen scenes and stuff like that, and like maybe some of it's like parchment that's being burnt and portraits being burnt and blood being spilled and all sorts of stuff. I would like to see something like that.
Right on.
Like give it a sense of, it would also like reinforce the idea, like the sense of that this is the history of this show you already know.
If we have several shows to talk about, but I have one other thing I'd like to bring up. I mean, obviously, y'all, if you, Wendy, or Lady Gwyn, if you have something else you want to bring up, obviously do so. But I have one last thing to add here, which is I'm very curious how they're going to handle the way Fire and Blood was written, which is that we're presented with multiple options for a lot of events, like Mushroom's version, Septon Eustace's version. Sometimes there's a third version, and sometimes they don't just conflict, but it's just impossible to reconcile one version with the other. They're just so different. Mockumentaries, that would be so amazing. A mockumentary style Game of Thrones show. That would be so funny. Yeah. But like seriously, so like how are they going to handle
Nettles
that?
In the background, just like with her snaggletooth, just like, can you believe the nerve of this bitch? Just that would be amazing.
Yeah. So how are they going to handle like these situations where the history is presented three different options? They're going to have to decide, or sometimes they can get clever, but mostly they're going to have to weigh in.
I bet they just kind of work that in somehow from different character perspectives. You know, like they're you've got the blacks, the greens, and maybe a third option of somebody who's trying to be neutral or something. And I bet they find clever ways to weave that.
Ambiguity can go
really, a lot. Ambiguity, yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I wonder if they can do it every time. There might be a few times where they just have to wait. And like with Rhaenyra and Daemon, like they can't. They I don't know if they can be ambiguous with that. Like someone has to flirt with the other one. I mean, they can't have it be entirely mutual, can they? I mean, they could, but
on the HBO website write-up, they've already seem to have chosen a specific version of the Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole story. So if you read that, they are. It seems to be. I mean, I don't know if who knows who's writing that or anything. It could just be the writer, but definitely they didn't present it as ambiguous. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It would be interesting. Like, I wonder like what they're going to do with the character depictions too, because it's very complicated. Fire and Blood made it pretty clear. Like, I mean, not that the princess and the queen made anybody come off great, but like, Fire and Blood has really reinforced these are terrible people. They're all terrible, every single one of them, except Nettles, who's great.
Well, let's talk about my favorite characters from Fire and Blood. Were the dragons. So, there's 19 dragons. I don't know if they're going to be able to really portray 19 dragons in this show.
A few dragon writers are going to get cut.
I hope they show us, really a plethora of dragons, because really the great tragedy of we've talked about in our Dance the Dragons episode, Aziz, that my opinion is that the great tragedy is all the dragon deaths. It's so sad. Why?
That being said, I kind of understand why Aegon III wasn't too invested in keeping them around.
Trauma.
Well, by the time I got to that point, for sure.
A lot of them anyway. Yeah. Well, should we move on to one of the other? Let's
move on, because the next one is a good one.
We used half our time on this one, so we'll use the rest of our other half on all the rest of them.
Yes. Right.
So this Tourney of Harrenhal stage production is the only other one that's confirmed. At this point, these other ones are in development, so we'll speak to them with the caveat of they may not actually happen. But Tourney of Harrenhal, that's kind of cool because George is involved to some degree, which even a little involvement by him means that it gives it a seal of authenticity for whatever happens. That may not turn out to be the case, but I'm optimistic that we're going to learn. To put it more succinctly, I'm optimistic we're going to learn more details about the Tournament of Harrenhal, which is, of course, a hugely important event that I know a lot of us are curious about. So what do you guys think?
I'm so excited. I'm bouncing up and down in my chair.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I didn't see this coming at all, right? Like stage production, you say. Like, wow. So, yeah.
It was our friend Zach texted me one day, when this news broke last month. I just was at work one day and I got a text from Zach and he was like, "You got to come to New York."
Yeah.
Like, what?
That's a good reason to go to New York. There's plenty of other reasons, but
sign me up.
I mean, we know that George has script writing experience, which helps. I mean, not just in the show, but although I wonder, has he ever staged a play?
I don't think so, but
it is a different beast overall. Yeah. It'll be interesting. I think of and it's not like you don't have successful conversions, before. Like, I mean, Julie Taymor started on the stage and she made Titus, and that movie's amazing. But like the other way around might be a little bit different because these are going to have very different restrictions than what we're used to.
Yeah.
And that's what's
he's working with, experienced playwrights and people who are experienced in the medium. So I have a lot of confidence. I have the statement that he made to the Hollywood Reporter when this was announced. I have here, and I'm going to read it because it actually, the end part of it is the part that makes me get really excited. So he said, so this was George announcing that this is going forward back in March. The seeds of war are often planted in times of peace. Few in Westeros knew the carnage to come when highborn and small folk alike gathered at Harrenhal to watch the finest knights of the realm compete in a great tourney during the year of the false spring. It is a tourney oft referred to during HBO's Game of Thrones and in my novels, A Song of Ice and Fire. And now, at last, we can tell the whole story on stage.
Like this is just like the Greens and Blacks. Like it's the same sort of like event that kind of helped launch it all. Like it's a familiar parallel there. It's so cool.
Yes.
Like they can't lean like with the worry that some people have with House of the Dragon. And I don't personally have this worry, but I acknowledge that it's possible and that it's a fair thing to worry about. If people are like, oh, they're going to lean too much on effects and dragons and not tell a good story. You absolutely cannot do that on a stage production. It has to be story, dialogue, acting, character. There is no special effects to fall back on. So they just really, it has to be good.
I can't wait to see Aerys. I can't wait. Oddly enough, I'm actually really interested in seeing a young Robert Baratheon too. Is that weird?
No.
I know everybody's excited, pumped for like Lyanna and Rhaegar, but like I'm really interested in like seeing like the friendship between him and Ned. I'm gonna make Chloe happy. I'm really excited to see what's going on with Ashara Dane.
Well, I think we all want to know what was going on with her for sure.
Yeah. You could just like pick a character at random who's at the tournament, and we're like, yeah, more. Tell us more. Yeah, that one too. Yep, that one too. Yep, too. Yeah. That's the square that we never heard of before. Yeah, tell me everything.
They better get some like badass singer to play Rhaegar, though. They're gonna need to. Like,
this might even include Isle of Faces stuff, y'all. Like, we got Howland Reed meeting Lyanna. Like, there is some insane potential here.
Yeah,
I know.
I feel like it has to sort of closely mirror Reed's story, the way she tells it to Bran, because that really gives you the background, like the way I see that is like there's Act 1 is what happened beforehand, and then Act 2 is what happened during the tourney, and then maybe there is an Act 3 that of the aftermath sort of stuff. But I think she sets it up in a very good sort of skeleton, and then bring in new stuff.
You know what I would actually love is actually having Mira Reed narrating it. In a way, like
the narrator,
what if she narrated it from the future? Like that would be kind of awesome. Like that would be kind of,
yeah.
That would be kind of awesome.
Yeah,
I like that idea. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. The only, of course, the downside we must acknowledge is that it's going to be a lot harder to see this for people. So, like, people, maybe there'll be filmed versions of it for some people to see. I don't know. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe that's.
They might. What if they release the script the way J.K. Rowling had the Cursed Child?
Yeah, it seems likely. Whatever happens, we'll definitely all find out what's in it, even if not everyone's able to attend it. So the information will be captured one way or the other. So yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's just very exciting. I guess right now it's only planned to pop up in a few different cities, but that'll probably change, and we'll have more information on that later. This is still a ways away, I guess. Has anyone seen a timeline on this at all? It seems like it's still pretty new, but
I think it just got announced.
No timeline. Okay. It was
I didn't think so.
March. Okay. So, but yeah, London, New York, and Australia, maybe.
I thought that's what I saw that too. Yeah, London, New York, Australia. Pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. So it would be great, especially given distance and given, obviously pandemic hopefully is winding down before this happens, but it would be great to have them give some thought to, streaming it or doing something.
There's a few good comments here on topic. Jonathan Hagee says, or film it like Hamilton. And Dornish James says, yeah, I'm hoping HBO might release a filmed version like Disney did with Hamilton. Very, that seems like a reasonable thing to be optimistic about. And then Sasa K says, yeah, a lot of operas and such have tried broadcasting performances to movie theaters because not everyone can afford Broadway pricing. Or in this case, it's not just the ticket, but going to the city where it is. There's the hotel and the plane ticket.
It might also end up being released through Marquee TV, which is generally it's basically the streaming service for like ballets, operas, and like.
Oh.
So,
okay. Cool. So yeah, not so hopefully that's a barrier that can be overcome without too much difficulty. Either way, I wouldn't see it as too big of a damper on the whole thing. Are we ready to move on to some of the speculated ones?
Yeah.
We've got up to five right now. One of them is too vague maybe to say much about, but we'll start with the Velaryon sea snake, since we've sort of talked about their involvement in the House of the Dragon. This is one thing about this idea is I suppose it somewhat depends on how well House of the Dragon does, because if it does really well, people are going to maybe want to know more about this character. And if it doesn't do that well, or if it's only doing moderately well, it feels like this is maybe less likely. Am I tying them together too much? Or do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think it does, but I think also they're going to be looking. This is a potentially really good thing because we're going to be seeing like other parts of Planetos. So,
Yeah.
And I think that's
yeah.
Even if they don't, of course, they might end up merging that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to expand on like. Well, can I talk about 10,000 ships too?
Why not? I mean, yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Like, I think it's fair to say that some people doubt that both of those will get made because it's kind of world-spanning stuff.
Yeah,
but
that's an issue. But I think I wouldn't be totally shocked if they tried to combine elements from the two in terms of like the exploration. Like, they might decide, we don't have enough money to make both shows, so let's just have Nymeria the Rhoynar like go all the way around the world before she hits Dorne.
Add a few stops in that. Yeah, it's not unreasonable. Yeah.
Hello,
Well,
UT.
Yeah, they're being developed by completely different people though, and what interests me about Nine Voyages is it's being developed by Bruno Heller, who is the creator of Rome, which is a very, very successful HBO show.
Yeah, but it got sunk by its but unfortunately got sunk by its production costs.
Yeah,
it did, but
it was also a joint production, and those are always more fraught with problems. Which this is pure HBO now, so they're not going to have BBC like back out or anything like that, which is part of what happened last time.
Right. And I was interested that they named him. They did not name the people who are doing the others. And, whether that's just because they're unknowns or what have you. But, he's obviously got history with HBO. So I think the problem with this one really is the challenge of how do they tie it all together with an overarching narrative? Because, it's cool. It's a really great idea going to all these different places. But at the end of the day, how do you keep it from just being a travelogue where you just like, oh, there's another cool place. Oh, here's cool place number 3. I mean, so they have to come up with some sort of a frame story to keep narrative interest and tension and all that stuff.
Well, let me counter argue. Let me throw a counter argument at you there with a show that successfully did not do that. They were successful despite not doing what you're saying, and it's something that I feel is going to be similar to what this show does if it happens, which is Star Trek: The Next Generation, or just Star Trek in general. They just went around to places and explored new life and new civilization. In this case, they're going to, instead of working and helping solve their problems, they might loot them and attack them. But
I think it's a little bit different because with Star Trek: The Next Generation, you also have like all these like moral issues. Like not every episode was an exploration episode.
I agree.
Most of the best episodes have to do with like, is Data human? And
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
From a very early on with that stuff, and they did start to weave in more things that traveled through the narrative as the show went on and became more successful. And then when you get to Deep Space Nine, to stick with Star Trek, Deep Space Nine really had a narrative.
Yes, you're
they
right.
moved
Ooh,
away
yeah.
completely from
My
that. Just
best trek.
one
Best
episode.
trek, best captain.
And
Everyone
so did all the
says, yes.
others, right? Like, I don't even watch Voyager or whatever it was. The one where they were flung into another parallel,
Voyager had
whatever that one was.
I'm not a fan of Voyager at all.
But taste aside, that was a narrative. Like that had an overarching narrative,
it
right?
had a narrative because there was
They're
there
trying
was
to get home.
frame story of what happened, and that's their
they're searching for a
even
way to
though
get back.
people complained about how they went about it.
But another problem I think with this show could be that won't be a problem with 10,000 ships is now maybe there are ways around this, I think, but they're going to have to. It's a challenge from the conceptual point of view, is that like you don't have a lot of women on ships. It's in medieval settings, and they could just change that and just say, hey, we're gonna have women. But like that could be a problem if the show is just like overly male.
Also,
yeah, right.
The relevance of it, like Nymeria is fucking relevant. Fire and Blood's relevant. Torny the Hand is relevant. Tales of Duncan Egg are relevant.
10,000 ships also gives you the destruction of the Rhoynar, which is like, whoa, what a thing to put on screen.
It's all relevant stuff, but like, I'm sorry, but 9 Voyages really is a side mission.
If you had to pick, y'all, which one would you pick of these two? Let's not assume that they both won't happen, but if you had to pick,
I would 10,000 ships.
Yeah, I would pick the Nymeria one. I think this is maybe a chance of redemption for Dorne.
3 for 3. We all.
Yeah.
It has such little source material that could really work for them.
That's true.
It could be a great boon for them to be able to have more freedom. I mean, not that 9 Voyages has not that much source material either. Just
we actually have a pitch for this show. Shea made on our channel because like each season in a different location, you have so many like compelling character stories of like refugees, and I think there's a lot more opportunity, I think, with that.
There's also, it's a very tiny thing, but Nymeria will be familiar to Game of Thrones fans, the casual fans, because of the name, because of Nymeria Sand and also Nymeria the Wolf. So at least there's like some sort of recognition there, which I think they nobody
remembers Nymeria Sand if you're just a Game of Thrones.
It's the wolf only, just the wolf.
They all remember the badass wolf.
She's Nym, not Nymeria.
The only sand snake anybody remembers is Tyene, and that's just because of that horrible boner-activated poison scene. But it was
with her great dialogue. Well, you don't remember her great dialogue?
Tell me I'm prettier than all the other girls. Tell me I'm prettier than all the girls. It really matters that this 65-year-old pockmarked man says I'm prettier than all the other girls.
Yep. They needed one woman in that writing room.
I have bad pussy. I have no woman. No to Benioff and Weiss. No woman in the world would say that she has bad pussy. Okay, when I think bad pussy, I think venereal disease. All right.
Yeah. Fair point, right? So, Lady Gwyn, you write this is a chance at redemption for Dorne, which it could be. It could be.
I mean, it couldn't get any worse.
It's kind of a low bar to set. You're right.
Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not.
Exactly.
You're not wrong.
That's
what right happened. About women, and I think you're probably right about a lot of men. I doubt many men would be like,
I have a bad dick.
Bad.
Well, I cringed at that line. Yeah, I mean,
everybody.
A lot of men did. Yeah.
Look,
I don't want the bad one. I want the good one. I mean, really.
If I went up to my boyfriend and if I went up to Jim and went I have bad pussy, he would be like, okay, go to the doctor.
He'd be like, go
to the doctor. Also, I'm dumping you.
Okay, let's move on. Do we have anything else to say about either of those two sort of related travelogue show ideas? Did we miss any questions from the commenters here?
I don't think so. Yes. No.
Okay, let's talk about. Well, if we miss anything, we can always come back. But let's talk about Tales of Duncan Egg. So this is pretty interesting because one thing originally George was kind of against this, but now he seems to have changed his mind. There's not a lot of source material on one hand, but what we have is extremely well developed in terms of you actually have very fleshed out characters, dialogue, complete stories, which is very different than what we have from Fire and Blood, where it's more like the events are very well fleshed out and there's lots of them, but the characters are extremely vague, not to mention the conundrum of multiple sources giving conflicting accounts. There's none of that here. But like, think about the like, could you really do the Hedge Knight novel as a whole season? Maybe. Like, you'd have to add a lot to it, though. So I could see that, but I feel like that's one of the main challenges. So with that set up, let me Lady Gwyn, let's go.
Yeah, I was thinking this too, but a lot of flashback or non-linear scenes are going to be absolutely necessary if they do this, because that would be the case with all three of the novellas, right? A lot of the meat in those stories is the backstory. So they'd really have to lean on this sort of like weaving in backstory technique somehow or other. And after they could maybe show some prequel-ish stuff in season 1, but once they pass that, they're tied into backstory, flashbacks, that sort of thing, which could work. They could also choose to just do shorter seasons. I know HBO, does this 10-episode seasons, but it's very typical in British television, for instance, that 6-episode seasons are the norm, or 8. And we're seeing that with Disney and the MCU series. Those are running at 6 and 8. So they're more like mini series, so they could just go shorter and just give us.
You probably see them less rigid about that. Like, why just always do 10? Like, why would they just force themselves to? Yeah, it doesn't seem logical that they would have to do 10 or nothing.
Right. The rules are changing. So
I actually wouldn't hate it if they did it like Sherlock, just 3 movie length episodes.
Oh yeah, those are like hour and a half, right, or something like that.
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, okay.
That I think actually would fit the structure really well. I think there's enough in each novella for there to be 90 minutes worth of material for 3 episodes, like 3 episodes, 9 minutes worth of material. I want to see like Westeros in depth. I want to see them wander around.
Like seeing villages and like small, like lower,
and
like
not everything destroyed, because they had Arya and the Hound wandering around the Riverlands for like 2 seasons. And you basically just saw a lot of mud, to be honest. It was mostly about their interactions with other people. But I'd like to see more of like the locations and just one of the interesting things about most of this, except for like Fire and Blood and I guess 9 Voyages, is that like it's going to be times of peace,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting to see that. I mean, I also really want to see what happens with Roy and Weber, but.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll show some of those other past events. Like they could show, Dagon's invasion. They could expand on that. They could expand on the spring sickness. Those
Stuff
are things that are
just in the backstory. That
they could greatly increase that.
Yeah.
And we don't have to. One thing they could do is just not only show us Dunk and Egg's POV, like because technically it's only Dunk's POV, really, but they could jump back to King's Landing and show us. King Daeron for a minute, because he's part of the story, but he's never on screen. But they could in the show show us Daeron,
Blood Raven.
But yeah, please, show us that. Like, how could they not give us that? Seems like a big wasted opportunity to not do that, right? Of course, he does eventually come on screen anyway, but still, why not show him in season 1? Because that's by the way, huge point. George hadn't fully fleshed out the Blackfires during Hedge Knight. It's kind of odd that they aren't talked about. So that obviously they can fix. They can go
it's brought up the age difference because Dunk and Egg falls such a large expanse of years, and that's an interesting point. But I do think if they do individual episodes, like little movies, I do think that they'll be able to handle that a little better. Also, they might just change the timing around. I mean, little Sam remained a baby for 5 years.
He did.
So and let's be honest here, George isn't so great with the time thing either, okay? He is to math what Shakespeare was to geography. He's terrible at it. So everyone moves at the speed of the plot, and money has varying values. Apparently, the Gold Dragon's exchange rate just keeps going.
It's a good point to bring up for adaptations too, because that is something that we have to, if you don't expect or accept changes to ages and timelines, you're just setting yourself up to be disappointed. It's your business if that's how you want to think about it. But personally, that's one of the few things I'm like, I just write that off. Like we're not going to have the ages and timelines be the same. I'm going to call that a win, a bonus if it does line up with existing count. Be like, cool, this actually is the same. But I'm not going to be like, if it's not the same, I'm going to be mad, because it's just adaptations are just too. You got to give them a little leeway there, I think.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so do we have anything else to say about Tales of Dunk and Egg? Should we talk about Flea Bottom, which is
go on to this?
Maybe related. I don't know. Flea Bottom, like, it's so vague, but it's kind of interesting. Like, the fact that it's so vague is part of what makes it intriguing, because like, what is it that they see? Why do they see this as such a good idea? What is it that they see here? What potential do they see? You know, and it relates to Dunk and Egg a little bit, because I mean, conceptually, because Dunk is from Flea Bottom. So,
yeah, I mean, who else is from Davos? Is from Flea Bottom. I mean,
true.
You know, at first I was thinking, gosh, this is going to be completely original, because all we have is a setting, but we do have a couple of major characters, one from, you know, the original show and one from this other one that we're talking about, who originated there. So, I mean, it could be some sort of like a related.
Yeah, I think one of the criticisms that I actually do agree with when it comes to A Song of Ice and Fire is that, like, we see so much from the perspective of, like, nobility. Even the people who are pretending to be common born are secret nobility, you know. And I think I think this might be a very interesting look into that. If George is involved, I'll be very happy. But I don't think we've gotten any news.
Yeah, it's so vague what the show is at this point. It's like, ooh, yeah. But no, you're totally right. That point about nobility is, you're right. There's like a couple of POVs in the whole series that are like that you could argue that way. And Davos is now part of the nobility. He has that background.
Yeah, and when we meet him, he's already part of the nobility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then
first thing we learn is that his wife is at home being called Milady, running their
And we have like characters like Pate in the POV, and Chet is just awful. Like, you don't want to, like, if he's an example of a commoner, it's like, well, he's a horrible guy. Like, he's not. He doesn't really give us a great look at what it's like, because he's not doesn't have a commoner's life anymore. He's on the wall, so that's not really. So really, it's just like the Pate. And that's like it. One chapter of Pate who's obsessed with a girl. So it's not really, we don't really get much of his life or anything. It's just his obsession. So, and then he dies. So yeah, you're right. That's a huge potential here of seeing like this another side of the world that is not explored, that we all try to. I guess one thing that's a pretty common topic amongst this fandom is we try to imagine. This is the part where we find our imagination going a lot. Is like, what is it like for these other characters? Or like, what's it like for. Well, that's one of the things we'll talk about in the minor characters panel tomorrow.
So, indeed, yes, yeah.
What does the chat have to say about Flea Bottom? Anything? Braun. Someone mentions Braun as a possible character. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, possible. And also brothel stories, because we just haven't gotten enough brothels.
Well, it'd be interesting if it was from their point of view rather than from like.
Yeah, that'd
exactly.
Be pretty great.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Gendry's mother. Which would feed it, which would be really part of that. I mean,
mother, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we have a few minutes left, so there's one more. The animated series, which could it be already one of the others? Like, could the Dunk and Egg thing actually be the animated series? The Flea Bottom thing actually be the animated series? I don't know. Maybe there's some data that says no, but
Make it an anime, by the way.
That would be cool.
It's worth noting that Dunk and Egg already exists as graphic novel.
True.
So, I mean, it just as soon as I thought about this, I thought, well, you know, I can actually already visualize Dunk and Egg as animation. So, you know, and actually some people in the chat were pointing out that it might make it easier to cast Egg, because the age problem would be solved if you just made him a cute little character instead of having to deal with an actor who's aging or not aging or what have you.
Well, just cast. I think casting multiple actors is fine, but like I actually would really like to see the Conquest be done animated.
Ooh, yeah.
That way they would have far fewer restrictions on the scale of everything, because like, I mean, I'm sorry, there's just so many of these grand scale battles. You know, there's Hellholt, there's Harrenhal, you know, all this stuff, and that would, the limitations that you would normally have would just not exist if it were animated.
It's a good point. Yeah, like you can't, because like you can't just make all of these. You can't just film 10 different House of the Dragon style shows where there's dragon battles and all of them. It's like, yeah, and like maybe that could be a thing in 10 years if this franchise continues to rise at this pace. But you're right. Like now, currently, no animated series, and even with Star Wars, which is probably the best example here,
Mm-hmm.
it is that big of a franchise, but they also still do both live and like it's not like one or the other.
Yeah.
It's just a good medium. Yeah.
It is. And I wanted to point out that, so you mentioned Star Wars and obviously, you know, the MCU seems obvious. They have loads of, you know, animated things. Star Trek has come out with Below Decks, which is kind of a look at the little people of Star Trek universe. So we're seeing all these big franchises using this medium to expand, bless you, to expand their universe, to provide important backstory, you know, stuff like that. And I'm pointing out that the Disney MCU has this What If animated series coming out this summer, which is a departure. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's what if certain things happened differently, and that's a big animation, and it's bringing back all the voices of everyone we know and love from the Avengers. So whether or not this one gets out of development, I'm pretty sure that the animated series is probably there because everyone else is doing it. Because you know, CBS is doing it, and ABC is doing it, and Amazon is doing it, and Netflix is doing, you know, so all these big giants, there's, you know, basically streaming television has come down to like, you know, 5 or 6 giant players. Yeah. And they're all competing with each other. They all have to keep up with each other. So
it's taken a while for like this country, and maybe it applies to the rest of the world as well, to get over the idea that animated is for kids. Like that's been a pervasive notion that's been wrong forever, but it's been out there, and it's starting to pretty much die off.
Yeah, and somebody said that animation won't meet like the same amount of viewers. I think it really does depend, though. Yeah. Because I think the power of the franchise could propel that. I think it actually could be pretty groundbreaking in that respect too, since like, you know, we like we just said it, a lot of people in the West have this idea that animation is just for kids. Yeah. They've never seen Watership Down. And
it's a silly notion that it's only for kids. Like why? Like what is so inherent about it that it's like it's a story told visually? Like what? So what? Like that's with dialogue. Like it's just like anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. No, to that point, our friend Matt McSorley in the chat points out that it doesn't reach the same number of viewers for that, most likely for that reason. So,
but it's cheaper to make, so you know, it's like
it definitely is.
Yeah, so. But like seriously, we could essentially, you know, Dornish Dame just pointed out like The Simpsons in animation has been going for the last 30+ years. Yeah, but that's more in the comedy realm, and it was always like Simpsons were kind of an all ages thing too. Like I watched The Simpsons when I was a little kid. It's true, more adult animation is happening, but it's usually done in like some kind of, it's like Adult Swim style stuff or Archer. Whereas the idea of a grand story, it told in an animated way. You know?
But that point about The Simpsons is pretty good too, though, in that it speaks to how animated shows can have more longevity because of aging and things like that. Just don't matter. Like this is as long as your voice doesn't dramatically change, you can voice this character 30 years later. Like these same actors have been. A lot of those Simpsons voice actors are like, yeah, we want to keep doing this. We're like, this is an easy job. We're all friends now. Like easy ass money. Like, and it has that longevity.
So a lot of people are pointing out like other things that aren't for kids. I know that there's Western animation that is not made for kids. We're not saying that what animation is necessarily for kids. We're saying that it is a very popular view among viewers in the West that animation is for kids.
Right. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, we're not saying it is. We're pushing back against the pervasive
notion. I
watch
animated stuff all the time. Like, Venture Brothers is one of my favorite shows, like of all time. So like we understand that. We're just saying that there's a popular bias in the West that if you are making an animated show, it's either for kids or it's some kind of raunchy Seth MacFarlane-esque comedy. Yeah. And it's not, you know, that's just what we're talking
thankfully
about.
That attitude seems to be dying off, but it's still there a bit.
We're killing it off.
Yeah, we're doing our part. We're helping a little bit here today. Well, we said we'd go about an hour. It's been 59 minutes. So if there aren't any more questions, we'd like to at least acknowledge pouring one out for our homie Blood Moon. Now, we all I don't know what anyone's thoughts on whether they thought this would work out or not, but the fact that it didn't work out, and HBO clearly wanted it to, like it's a Game of Thrones show. The fact that it didn't happen, yeah, it must have been kind of bad if they just decided to can it, because they really wanted it to work. It probably had more leeway than most shows because it's an existing famous property. So the fact that it didn't get made, I hate to admit it, but it probably had a lot of problems. That still doesn't it doesn't take away the sting though, because I think a lot of us were like, oh wow, this is exciting. And even if you think it wasn't going to be good, it could have been. Like it definitely had a chance to be good.
I agree with the Shay in the chat who says that it was her least favorite of all the ones mentioned. Yes, mine too. But I will say, I toast Jane Goldman and Naomi Watts because they are fabulous.
I was hoping was she going to be playing Lan the Clever, or did they?
We never found out.
Heck no!
I wish they could have told us. Yeah,
I wanted her to be Lan the Clever.
That would have been so cool. Yeah, Lan's sister. Give us Lan's sister.
Just make Lan a woman. Just do it.
No, I mean the family name would be then Lan's sister because they all formed from her.
That's just Aziz giving us a fun pun to end the stream.
Can't help myself. I think I went through the whole stream without one. So.
You did, so very good job.
Had to get
bringing it in at the end.
Cool. Oh yeah, it looks. John Eigen says the original Game of Thrones pilot was also a disaster. Fair point. Yeah, it was. They were actually able to fix that one. Apparently, they couldn't fix the Blood Moon pilot.
It wasn't like they were going to completely shelve that one, anyways, because it's not like they had 14 other shows they could be making in that.
That's true. That's a good point.
They already spent a lot of money on the rights, and it was like, and they weren't. This
pilot did get reshot. Like the Blood Moon pilot was filmed. They were like, and they tried again, and they were still like, nope. So yeah. John Egan also says, "I wish they would release these." Like, yeah, let us see it. Like, if it's done, if the eye's dead, just
do a special edition box set of the show of Game of Thrones and make it an extra on the DVDs.
Yeah. And then we could all be like, "Oh, yeah, that was bad." Okay, they didn't make
almost
that.
As bad as Dorne.
They could be like, "See, aren't you glad we didn't do this?" All right. Well,
okay, guys. Well,
thanks to Ice and FireCon. I'm glad you all showed up.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Yes, and go Team Venture.
Yeah, we'll see.
Can we say where people can find us? Or
yeah, do that. Let's have our spiels, and let's see. And of course, I look forward to seeing everybody else at other panels this weekend, and for Shay's Quiplash that's being run tonight. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Guys, if you're out there watching, come back at in 1 hour for
in 1 hour,
because it is going to be epic.
Fun. Yes. So please, Wendy and Lady Gwyn, tell everyone where to find y'all, and I'll do the same at the end.
You can find me on the Wendy Nerd at Twitter. I also I'm on Twitch, just twitch.tv/Wendy Nerd. I do all sorts of stuff. I dress up. I do CK2. I do The Sims. I do Hades. I do Cyberpunk 2077. So I do a lot of different stuff. And I also do Vampire the Masquerade. I have a Vampire the Masquerade show. You can find us on YouTube at Les Bordeaux Alseng. And I've got an upcoming Discworld podcast. It's going to be called The Unseen Idiots. So there you
go. Okay. Well, I'm Lady Gwyn. You can find me on Radio Westeros at Lady Guinevere, or at Radio Westeros on Twitter, or radiowesteros.com. Find our podcast. We're over on YouTube as well. We really sell our podcast there. So if you don't know us, come check us out. And we do lots of Song of Ice and Fire analysis. So plenty to go around, isn't there?
Yeah. Especially once these shows start coming out, boy, that'll really kick it up a notch. So that'll be cool. Especially if there's multiples going at the same time, boy, that'll be something. And with that, I too have coverage over on History of Westeros. And in fact, Lady Gwyn and I work together quite a lot on those. But a lot of y'all know that already. So kind of restating what's there. But and we'll be on another panel tomorrow together.
Also got another panel tomorrow as well.
Cool. What's your other one?
6 p.m. The book club Senlin Ascends.
Cool. Very good. All right, everybody who's watching, come back for more panels.
Come back and support Ice and Fire on Patreon, please. They need it more than ever.
Yes. Good call. Cool. All right, y'all. Thanks, and we'll see you for more Ice and FireCon panels.
Go
Okay.
Team Venture.